While panicked investors were throwing themselves out of windows in 1929, a secret society of millionaires was quietly buying up America at an 80% discount. Here is their blueprint and why it is happening again, right now. Imagine the scene. October 1929. The streets of New York are echoing with the screams of a dying middle class. Men who thought they were titans of industry just days ago are now beggars in the rain. Fortunes built over a lifetime, vaporized in a matter of minutes. But step away from the blood-soaked pavement of Wall Street. Go up, high above the chaos, into the mahogany-lined boardrooms of the elite. There is no panic here. There is only the quiet clinking of crystal glasses and the sweet smell of absolute victory. History books have lied to you. They tell you the Great Depression was a tragic accident, a mysterious failure of the free market that ruined everyone equally. That is a comforting fairy tale designed to keep the masses quiet. The truth is far more sinister. Wealth is never actually destroyed. It simply changes hands. The crash of 1929 was not a tragedy for the top 1%. It was a masterclass, an engineered wealth transfer of unimaginable proportions. They did not just survive the storm, they orchestrated the harvest. Today, we will rip the mask off history. We will look at exactly what the financial predators bought when blood was in the streets. We will expose the exact portfolio of the elite, and more importantly, how you can use their exact blueprint to survive the invisible crash happening right now.
Educational and historical content only, not financial advice.
To understand the slaughter, you must first understand the trap. Welcome to the Roaring Twenties. It was an era of intoxicating illusion. For the first time in history, the average man believed he could play the game of kings. Shoeshine boys, cab drivers, and factory workers were throwing every penny they had into the stock market. Why would they not? The market only went up. It was a hypnotic trance of greed, a nationwide epidemic of the fear of missing out. The middle class was drunk on the illusion of infinite wealth, but they were completely blind to the butcher sharpening his knives in the shadows. The bait in this trap was a poison called margin debt. Wall Street convinced the public that patience was for fools. Why wait decades to get rich when you could buy stocks with borrowed money? You only needed to put down 10%. And the bank would loan you the other 90%. It felt like magic. If a stock went up, your profits were multiplied. You were a financial genius. But what the bankers did not tell the public was that this debt was a leash. And the moment the market turned, the bank would yank that leash hard enough to break your neck. The elite watched this manic euphoria with cold, calculating eyes. They knew a fundamental law of financial history. When the shoeshine boy gives you stock tips, it is time to exit the building. And so, the smart money began quietly packing their bags. They slowly sold their inflated paper assets to the very people rushing in to buy the dream. Then came October 24th, 1929, Black Thursday. The music stopped, the illusion shattered. As the opening bell rang, a sudden, violent wave of selling hit the floor. The margin calls began. Brokers demanded their money back immediately, but the public had no cash, only paper. To pay the banks, they had to sell their stocks. But everyone was selling, and absolutely no one was buying. This is where the psychology of panic takes over. When the human brain faces sudden, catastrophic loss, logic completely shuts down. The primal fear of starvation and ruin hijacks the mind. It becomes a stampede of animals trying to escape a burning barn. Panic selling is not a financial decision. It is a biological reaction. And as millions of average investors dumped their life savings at fire sale prices, the market went into a death spiral, down 10%, down 30%, down 89%. The wealth of a generation evaporated into thin air. But remember, wealth is never destroyed, it is transferred. As the public panicked and liquidated everything they owned, the predators were waiting. They had dry powder. They had massive reserves of cash. And they were about to execute the greatest shopping spree in human history. The greatest lie ever sold to the public is that cash is trash during a crisis. For the top 1%, cash was not a safety net. It was a weapon of mass destruction. While the masses were borrowing money to buy overvalued stocks, The true masters of the universe were quietly doing the exact opposite. Men like Joseph Kennedy and John D. Rockefeller were liquidating their portfolios. They were gathering mountains of physical cash. But they did not stop there. They shorted the market. They placed massive bets that the American economy would burn. And when the flames finally engulfed Wall Street, they watched their war chests explode in value. With unlimited cash in their hands and blood flooding the streets, the engineered wealth transfer began. This is the moment history tries to hide from you. The public assumes these billionaires rushed in to buy cheap stocks. They think it was about catching a falling knife in the stock market. That is entirely wrong. The elite did not care about paper companies. They wanted absolute power. And power is not found in paper. It is found in dirt, steel, and energy. The predators began a calculated campaign of monopoly. They targeted the physical backbone of the nation. When thousands of banks collapsed, they swooped in and bought the real estate those banks held as collateral. They bought commercial buildings in Manhattan for pennies on the dollar. They bought vast expanses of agricultural land, knowing that people will always need to eat. They quietly purchased the utility companies, the monopolies that controlled the water systems, the electric grids that powered the factories, and the railroads that moved the nation's blood. While the middle class was fighting over scraps of food, the elite were quietly placing their names on the deeds to the very infrastructure that kept the country alive. They understood a terrifying concept known as emotional arbitrage. In financial terms, arbitrage is buying something cheap in one place and selling it higher in another. But emotional arbitrage is much darker. It is the business of buying human despair. When a man is facing starvation and eviction, he does not negotiate. He will sell his life's work, his family farm, his business, for 10 cents on the dollar just to survive another week. The predators did not negotiate with businesses. They negotiated with desperation. They bought the panic of the middle class. Imagine the sheer ruthlessness required to execute this plan. You are standing in a city where soup lines stretch for blocks. Men are losing their minds. Families are destroyed. Yet, you are systematically reviewing foreclosure documents, buying up entire city blocks for the price of a used car. You are not buying assets. You are buying the shattered dreams of your fellow citizens. This is the brutal reality of generational wealth. It is not built on hard work and savings. It is built on extreme patience and the ruthless exploitation of market hysteria. This was not an accident. The central banking system, designed to protect the economy, deliberately tightened the money supply right as the crash happened. They choked the economy of cash, raising interest rates when the public desperately needed a lifeline, ensuring that millions of small businesses would suffocate and fail. They essentially handed the keys of the nation to the titans who had the liquidity to buy it all up. The game was rigged from the very beginning. The middle class was lured into the casino, locked inside, and then the building was set on fire. The elite were simply waiting outside with a fire hose, ready to buy the ashes for fractions of a penny. The common investor fails because they have a hero complex. They want to be the one who catches the exact bottom. In 1929, thousands of people saw the first big drop and thought they were being smart. They jumped back into the market in 1930, believing the worst was over. They used the last of their savings to buy the dip. But the market did not bounce. It kept sliding. It bled for 3 long, agonizing years. By the time the real bottom arrived in 1932, those early bargain hunters were bankrupt. Their spirits were broken. Their houses were gone. The true predators, the masters of the engineered wealth transfer, did not have a hero complex. They had something far more powerful: cold, calculated patience. They did not buy in 1929. They did not buy in 1930. They waited until 1932. They waited until the suicide rates peaked. They waited until the newspapers stopped writing about a recovery and started writing about the end of civilization. They waited until the very word stock market was met with spit and curses. This is the predator's mindset. While the amateur is driven by the dopamine of a quick win, the elite are driven by the mathematics of total dominance. They understand that wealth is not about being first, it is about being last. being the last man standing with a mountain of cash when everyone else is forced to sell. This kind of patience is not a gift, it is a discipline. It requires the ability to watch your friends and neighbors make small gains in the short term while you sit on the sidelines, ignored, even mocked. But the predator knows that the longer the bubble inflates, the more violent the eventual collapse. They were not just waiting for prices to drop. They were waiting for the transfer of ownership to become absolute. In 1932, stocks were trading at less than 10% of their previous value. But more importantly, the ownership of America had become consolidated. Thousands of small, independent businesses had been wiped out. In their place stood a few massive, indestructible conglomerates owned by the very families who had stayed liquid. The elite do not look at a crisis as a problem to be solved. They look at it as a filter, a mechanism that removes the weak, the impatient, and the over-leveraged from the game. By the time the economy began to breathe again, the chessboard had been completely reset. The middle class was starting from zero, burdened by new debts and lower wages. Meanwhile, the elite had secured the next 100 years of their family's dominance. They did not just win the game. They bought the stadium, the teams, and the media outlets that broadcasted the scores. This is the iron rule of the wealth mindset. You do not build a fortune by following the crowd. You build it by having the courage to stay liquid when everyone is greedy, and the stomach to be aggressive when everyone is terrified. But most people cannot do this. Their biology betrays them. Their need for safety and social approval forces them to act exactly like the herd. And as long as you act like the herd, you will eventually be led to the same slaughterhouse. History does not repeat itself, but it often rhymes. As we stand in 2026, the rhymes of 1929 are becoming deafening. Look around you. The same ingredients that cooked the Great Depression are being measured out today in even larger quantities. The Roaring '20s were fueled by cheap credit and margin debt. Today, we have a global debt bubble that dwarfs anything seen in the 20th century. From national debts in the trillions, to corporate zombies kept alive by low interest rates, to the average American family struggling under record-breaking credit card balances. The leash is tight once again. And just like in 1929, the banks are preparing to yank it. We see the same manic euphoria in speculative assets. We see the same disconnect between the stock market and the reality on the ground, while the elite are quietly moving their wealth into hard assets, gold, silver, energy, and productive land. The public is being lured into the latest digital illusions. The trap is being set. The engineered wealth transfer of our generation is not a possibility. It is an inevitability. The signs are everywhere. Inflation is not just a temporary inconvenience. It is a tool. It is a slow-motion seizure of your purchasing power. It is the modern way of liquidating the middle class without a single window being broken on Wall Street. By the time you realize your savings are worthless, the elite will already own the assets that produce the things you need to survive. But there is a difference this time. In 1929, the average person was blind. They had no access to the playbook of the predators. Today, you are watching this. You have the ability to see the patterns before the trap closes. You have the choice to stop acting like the herd. Being prepared does not mean living in fear. It means having the mindset of the 1%. It means prioritizing liquidity over luxury. It means understanding that the coming volatility is not a crisis for everyone. It is the greatest opportunity you will ever see in your lifetime. If you have the patience to wait for the blood and the courage to buy when everyone else is selling their soul for a loaf of bread, the cycle is completing. The shadows of 1929 are stretching across the modern world. The question is not whether a crash is coming. The question is, when the wealth begins to transfer, whose pocket will it land in? Will you be the one being harvested, or will you be the one holding the scythe? The dust of 1929 has long since settled, but the footprints left by the giants of that era remain visible for those who know where to look. We have been taught to fear the crash. We have been conditioned to see economic storms as a time of ruin. But today, you have seen the truth. A crash is not a destruction of wealth. It is a violent, necessary, and highly engineered purification. It is the moment when the weak hands are forced to let go, so the strong hands can take hold. The elite do not pray for stability. They pray for the volatility that allows them to buy your future at a discount. Generational wealth is not built in the green years of plenty. It is forged in the black years of despair. It is built by the man who can stand in the middle of a screaming crowd and feel absolutely nothing but the cold, sharp edge of opportunity. It is built by those who understand that in the kingdom of money, there is no room for emotion, only for strategy. As we move deeper into the uncertainties of 2026, remember the faces of the secret winners of 1930. They did not have better information than you. They did not have more luck than you. They simply had a different mindset. They saw the blood in the streets, and they saw it as a bridge to a legacy that would last a century. The system is designed to harvest the unprepared. It is a machine that runs on the panic of the middle class. But now, you are no longer part of the harvest. You are an observer. You are a student of history, and soon you will be a participant in the next great transfer. Wealth is calling for a new owner. The question is, are you ready to answer? If you found value in this deep dive into the shadows of financial history, then you belong with us. Do not let the next cycle catch you sleeping. Subscribe to Mindset for Wealth right now. Join the fraction of the 1% who look at the coming storm and smile. Because while the world sees the end, we see the beginning. This is Mindset for Wealth. Protect your capital, sharpen your mind, and we will see you in the next chapter of the Great Transfer.